I want you to think about the last time you played a Crash Bandicoot game that felt like you were playing a Crash Bandicoot game. I know that sounds weird, but bear with me. I'm talking about a new Crash Bandicoot game that genuinely felt like it belonged in the Crash universe. And not the Insane Trilogy, that doesn't count, because that was just Naughty Dog's work rebuilt from archive footage. For most of us, we probably have to go back to 1999. Crash Team Racing, over 25 years ago. And the crazy part? That's not because nobody tried. Somebody tried. Constantly. 6 different studios, multiple publishers, radical redesigns, new mechanics, new lore, a live service multiplayer game that got shut down within a year. They tried everything except the one thing that actually worked. Letting the people who built him build him. This is the story of how corporate greed, a brutal IP dispute, and 20 years of wrong hands killed one of gaming's greatest characters, and why the future, if there is one, is cloudier than it's ever been. To understand how Crash died, you have to understand what made him extraordinary in the first place, because it wasn't just the games, it was the obsession behind them. Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, the two guys who built Naughty Dog from a bedroom startup into one of PlayStation's most important studios, were completely consumed by Crash. They spent months studying the PS1 hardware at a level nobody else bothered with. They invented their own programming language to squeeze performance out of the console that the manufacturer said wasn't possible. They built a camera system, a lighting system, a streaming engine, all custom or from scratch, because off-the-shelf tools couldn't do what they needed, and the results speak for themselves. The original trilogy didn't just sell well, it sold 26 million copies across 3 consecutive years while being developed by a team of fewer than 15 people. Crash Bandicoot 3, Warped, became the first non-Japanese game to sell over 1 million copies in Japan, a market that had almost never embraced a Western character in its history. Crash Team Racing followed in 1999, still considered by many to be the best kart racer ever made outside of Mario Kart, and it developed in roughly 10 months. 4 games, 4 years, all of them classics. All of them built with the same unified vision, the same team, the same relentless attention to what Crash was supposed to feel like. But underneath all of it, quietly, was a problem that would eventually consume everything. Naughty Dog didn't own Crash Bandicoot. They never had. From the very beginning, the IP belonged to Universal Interactive. Naughty Dog built him, named him, gave him his personality, his world, his enemies, his soul, and none of it was legally theirs. At the time, it didn't matter. Universal and Naughty Dog had a working relationship. Sony was publishing the games, everything was fine. Until it wasn't. By 1999, the relationship between Naughty Dog and Universal had deteriorated to the point of no return. Jason Rubin didn't mince words about it years later. In his own words, Universal owned the IP, and there was a hostility there that was just brutal. Brutal. That's a strong word from someone describing a professional relationship. But the reality was that Naughty Dog had made Universal a fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars from 4 games they poured their lives into. And at the end of it, they owned nothing. Every creative decision they made, every character they invented, every world they built, it all belonged to a corporation that had barely been involved in making any of it. So they made a decision. They would walk away. They would sell Naughty Dog to Sony and build a new game on new hardware with a new IP they actually owned and leave Crash behind. That game became Jak and Daxter, and it's brilliant, but that's not what this video is about. What matters is what happened to Crash the moment Naughty Dog left the room. Universal needed a PS2 launch title. They needed it fast, and they needed someone to make it. And here's what most people don't know about what Wrath of Cortex was supposed to be. Mark Cerny, the producer who had overseen all 3 original Crash games, had a vision for the PS2 debut. He called it Crash Bandicoot Worlds, an open world game. Crash traveling between different planets, a proper next generation leap. And Universal killed it. They fell out with Cerny and Sony, broke the exclusive publishing deal, and handed the project to Traveler's Tales, a studio that had never made a Crash game, and they were given one instruction: make it like the old ones, and do it in 12 months. 12 months, from scratch for a PS2 launch window title. The result was The Wrath of Cortex, a game with 45-second load times, caused by a loading screen minigame that had to be pulled at the last minute because of a Namco patent, with no time to fix the underlying problem. A game with over half its levels being vehicle sections, not because that's what the designers wanted, but because they were trying to fill a game that didn't have enough time to be filled properly. It wasn't a terrible game, but it was a pale shadow of what came before it, and critics knew it, players knew it, and somewhere in the game's files, hidden in the background texture of a level called Tsunami, Traveller's Tales had painted a message on an awning. If you knew where to look, it read, "Big Dog Squawk," a tribute to Naughty Dog, or a farewell, depending on how generous you're feeling. Either way, Crash's first step without his creators had already stumbled, and it was only going to get worse. What followed over the next 7 years was the most chaotic, directionless period any major gaming franchise had ever endured. 6 different studios, multiple publishers, each one handed the keys to a character they hadn't built and told to figure out what to do with him. Traveller's Tales tried something genuinely interesting with Crash Twinsanity in 2004, a game where Crash and Cortex were chained together and forced to cooperate. It was full of fourth wall-breaking humor and self-awareness, and honestly, parts of it were brilliant. It remains the most beloved post-Naughty Dog Crash game among the hardcore fanbase. Cortex even breaks the fourth wall at one point to acknowledge that the previous game hadn't done as well as everyone hoped.
The check bounced. Are you sure? Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
However, as is becoming the pattern, Universal refused to greenlight a sequel and cut Traveller's Tales loose entirely. Then came Radical Entertainment, and with them, the redesign. In 2007, Crash of the Titans arrived with a new look, a new mechanic, and a new direction. The familiar orange Bandicoot was gone, replaced by a leaner, edgier, more angular version of the character that felt like he'd been filtered through a hot topic. The core gameplay abandoned platforming almost entirely in favor of combat and a jacking mechanic where Crash could possess and control enemy mutants. It didn't feel like Crash Bandicoot, it just had his name. Mind Over Mutant followed in 2008, and then nothing. 7 years of complete silence. One of the most recognizable gaming characters of the 1990s simply vanished from the landscape. No announcements, no updates, no hint that anyone with the IP even remembered he existed. I want you to think about what was happening in gaming during those 7 years. The PS3 era, the Xbox 360, some of the greatest games ever made were releasing on those platforms. And Crash, the character who had sold over 40 million copies and gone toe-to-toe with Mario, wasn't there for any of it. Not a single game on PS3, his former home, the console he helped build. The character that Naughty Dog had poured everything into had been reduced to a dormant IP in a corporate filing cabinet, owned by Activision by this point, after Vivendi merged with them in 2008, and sitting completely untouched for 7 long years. Then something unexpected happened. In June 2016, at Sony's E3 press conference, a familiar sound filled the room, the Crash Bandicoot theme. And the audience, a room full of industry professionals who were paid to be cynical, lost their minds. The Insane Trilogy was coming, a full ground-up remake of the original 3 games. But here's what makes the story even more remarkable. Vicarious Visions, the studio tasked with making it, didn't have the original source code. Nobody did. It was gone. So they rebuilt Crash Bandicoot, Cortex Strikes Back, and Warped from scratch, using polygon meshes Sony and Naughty Dog still had on file, cross-referencing old video footage, concept art, and corrections from online fan communities who had been cataloging every detail of these games for decades. They literally rebuilt Crash from fan archives and YouTube videos, and they made it feel exactly right. The Insane Trilogy became the best-selling physical game worldwide in its launch month, despite releasing with only 2 days left in June 2017. It went on to sell 20 million copies. The character who had been sitting in a corporate filing cabinet for 7 years had just proven he was still one of gaming's most bankable names. Toys for Bob followed with Crash 4 It's About Time in 2020, critically acclaimed, a genuine sequel that respected the legacy while pushing the series forward. 5 million copies sold. And then Activision looked at 5 million copies and decided it wasn't enough. Crash 5 was in early development at Toys for Bob, concept art existed, story ideas were being developed, and one version had Crash and Spyro teaming up across dimensions. 2 playable characters, 2 beloved IPs, the kind of crossover that would have sent the fan base into meltdown. Activision cancelled it and moved Toys for Bob to Call of Duty support. They then greenlit Crash Team Rumble, a live service multiplayer game, which launched in 2023 and was shut down before it had completed a full year of post-launch support. So the studio that made Crash 4 one of the most celebrated platformers in years was making maps for COD Warzone. Vicarious Visions, the studio that rebuilt Crash from nothing, was absorbed into Blizzard and renamed. They don't exist anymore. 2 studios, both passionate about Crash, both dissolved by the same publisher that owned him. So where does that leave us now? In October 2023, Microsoft completed its $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard, and with it, Crash Bandicoot became a Microsoft IP. I want you to really think about that sentence. The character that Naughty Dog built as PlayStation's answer to Mario, the character that Ken Kutaragi, the father of PlayStation, didn't even want on his console, the character that Sony used to taunt Nintendo from a car park with a megaphone, that character now belongs to Xbox. If that makes you feel uneasy, I completely understand. I feel it too. Microsoft has an enormous stable of acquired franchises, and their track record with beloved IPs they've purchased is complicated, rare. The studio behind Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark was bought by Microsoft in 2002 for $375 million. Banjo-Kazooie hasn't had a proper game since 2008, and in 2025, 23 years after the acquisition, Microsoft cancelled Rare's most recent in-development game, laid off staff, and the game's director, a longtime Rare employee, left the company. That is the cautionary tale. A beloved franchise, a corporate acquisition, decades of silence. However, there is one thread of genuine hope. Toys for Bob, the studio that made Crash 4, went independent after leaving Activision and signed a publishing deal with Microsoft for the next game. Microsoft owns Crash and Spyro, Toys for Bob loves Crash and Spyro. The dots are there to connect, but they haven't been connected yet. No official announcement, no green light, and no confirmation. Just a studio that cares about this character, orbiting an IP they no longer control, but making a deal with the corporation that owns it. Crash Bandicoot has survived Universal's hostility, 6 different studios, a 7-year hiatus, Activision's indifference, 2 dissolved development teams, and a live service game that barely lasted a year. Whether he survives Microsoft's stable of forgotten acquisitions, that's the question nobody can answer. Yet. But like me, if you've grown up with this character, if you remember loading up your PS1 and hearing that theme for the first time, if you've got a save file somewhere full of nostalgia and a memory of who Crash used to be, then you're undoubtedly rooting for his success. The same way I am. He deserves a fair shot. He always did. He just never had the right people in the room when it counted. If you've made it this far, you're clearly as obsessed with this Orange Bandicoot as I am, which means you probably have a take on this. Do you think Microsoft will finally give Crash the home he deserves? Or is this just another corporate waiting room? Drop your answers in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into the history, the lore, and the stories behind the games you grew up loving, you know what to do. Much love, squad. I'll see you in the next one.